30 seconds or less.
Time me.
No, that's what I told people when I was pastor, when we did announcements. 30 seconds or less. Can't do it in 30 seconds, don't do it.
Time's up.
No, I didn't mean to put pressure on. Take your time.
I took a bag full of gloves and hats and scarves and a coat into Echoes, the winter shelter.
Yeah.
And they said, pass on the word that they do need that kind of stuff.
Oh, good.
So I'm passing it on. And you go into where the winter shelter is, the big new building.
Oh, okay.
Ring the bell, no one's there, so.
Anna, did they say men, women, children,
doesn't matter.
anybody?
Probably.
I don't know about children in the winter shelter. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I don't know, but maybe,
I
you
can't
know.
remember if they have family, I can't
Is there a number you can call?
They have family.
The Echoes, I don't have a phone number.
No, I mean, if we can get it online, people.
Oh,
the
yeah.
number, is there a
It's
number
the
to call?
Yeah, it's the Echoes winter
You might want
shelter.
to call before. you
Okay,
have
and they said,
class.
pass it along, so I'm
Yeah.
passing it along.
Okay,
I know.
good, that was 30 seconds or less.
Took up most of it.
Yeah, well,
Exceeded your 30
people
seconds.
ignored me anyway. No, E-Town does it right, they have, it's centralized through the pastors, otherwise you go on for 10 minutes. All right, we have to decide, Christian Ed decided that, the children's classes for, faith formation will not meet on the 29th of December, that's the Sunday between Christmas and New Year, so. And the adult classes, we can make our own decision, so. Any thoughts? You wanna meet? I'm willing to meet, I guess my question is, are people going to come on that day?
Well, we're sort of,
Yes.
we're worried, what would we do with our child during that time?
Yeah, she's worried about what she'll do with her parents. Well, Rainey, you're here. so
Why am I here?
I know what we're gonna do with you.
Hey, Rick, is that the Christmas miracle that's in the nursery right now?
I was concerned when Anna said she wanted to make an announcement that they were gonna say they're expecting. Christmas miracle.
Trina know anything about this?
Sarah was 80, right?
Well, my thought on whether or not we should meet in
Yeah.
church without Sunday school is only half of the church. I would like to be here for Sunday school.
Okay, we got
That's
a
the way I
plug in
feel.
there.
You'll be here.
All right,
I'm not going anywhere.
okay, we'll meet.
Yeah.
You get, we can make us, you may not, but. I think the people who are here pretty much. Okay, you help me out with that one. Now, let's get started. Does everyone, we're still on handout B33. You need a B33. This is the signs in the Gospel of John. So we're still working on signs. We're getting to the end. I think we're gonna work on the 6th sign today and hopefully the 7th. But the review is in John 2-12. I don't think I can stress enough. This is a unit. And, you know, you look at the synoptic gospels, they have parables and teachings of Jesus and stories all kind of strung together. But in John, things are, I'm gonna say, tightly woven. And the word sign, semeion, sign, is kind of the thread that weaves these 11 chapters together. And so we start off with the 7 signs. There are 7 signs, and that's all that John highlights, are 7 miracles by Jesus. That's it. And we know he did more than that, but he has a purpose here. He wants to focus on signs, miracles, so he only chooses 7. And then what he does is he uses the word semeion 16 times. That's the word for sign. He uses that word 16 times in those 12 or 11 chapters. So we get to see not only the signs that Jesus performs, but how people are interpreting those signs, how they're responding to those signs. And then they have discussion with Jesus, or he has a discussion with them. And that tells us more where things are going. So we have continuity in these 11 chapters, and there's a progression. So I hope you're seeing that as we have gone through at least the first 5 signs. So we're going to pick up with, where did we leave off? I think we finished.
Walking on water.
Walking on water, we finished that, right?
Yep.
So I want to pick up with the 9th occurrence of the word sign, semeion, and these are verses 25 and 26 of chapter 6. And on your handout, it's titled Seeking Jesus. So chapter 6, 25 and 26. Now, we had the sign walking on water. Jesus walking on water. That was a miracle. What was the miracle before that? Right before it. Feeding of the 5,000. This is important for these verses, 6, 25 to 26. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? And Jesus answered, and we'll have to talk about this. Very truly, I tell you, you're looking for me, not because you saw signs, semeion, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. You're looking for me, not because you've seen the signs or experienced them, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. So he's referring back to the feeding of the 5,000. What do you think of that?
Sounds like he thinks they're coming for free food.
Yeah. Brother thing, potluck, yeah. There he is.
Well, I'm suddenly
What's
wondering
his point?
why you spend so much time on signs and not talking about food.
What's that?
John spends all this writing effort talking about signs when he should have been talking about food apparently.
But to the people.
Well, and the disciples.
Well,
Sure.
I'm not understanding,
Are you being
yeah.
sarcastic or?
No, it just seems odd to me. That he spends all this effort in signs and all of a sudden he says,
Oh,
it's really about food. Wow, maybe we should hear more.
He's
Of course, we heard about the loaves of the fish.
He's really saying it's not about the.
yeah,
Well, yes, he is. Right.
yeah, he's saying, yeah. He's basically saying you're, in my opinion, you're coming to me for the wrong reason. You know,
could I read what the message says? I just accidentally
Please.
got into it.
yeah,
It says, you come looking for me, not because you saw God in my actions, but because I fed you, filled your stomachs, and for free. Great.
read that again.
You've come looking for me, not because you saw God
It's a sign.
in my actions.
Yes.
But because I fed you,
Oh.
filled your stomachs for free,
Yeah.
so for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I missed, fed you, yeah. Yeah, that's Peterson, and I think he's on target on that. You read the first part of that again, Donna. You come to me.
I almost lost.
Well, that's all right, but it,
Translation, I have it. You've come looking for me not because you saw God in my actions,
okay.
not because you saw God.
Yeah.
So there should have been the reason.
Mhm. Yeah, and remember, and I'll pick up on that just to review and say, that's what these signs are all about. These signs are pointing to God, they're pointing to the fact that Jesus is from God and Jesus is God. And
Through his actions.
through his actions, that's how people can know and believe. Because they're supposed to experience these signs. And then, and that's what we keep going back and forth in 2 to 12. Some believe, some don't. Some of these signs lead people to believe.
Don't we live that out all the time in the Church of the Brethren when we go on work projects? We're
Okay.
not there, yeah, I've been on several, and we're not there to convert people, we're not there to proselytize. We are there to do works through our actions, you can see God, and it works.
Yeah, well, they're very appreciative and, you know, I think people who go on work camps, they feel it as they're doing the work, and the recipients feel it. I mean, who are these guys? They come out of nowhere and they're helping us out. Of course, we can't help everyone out. People in Brethren Disasters Ministries, they have to choose a specific work camp.
Can I tell a quick story? When we were building some very, some very rudimentary houses in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah,
It was a group of almost all women with about 3 men from this church.
yeah.
Jeff Moomaw was a carpenter, so we kind of always referred back to Jeff. But no women came on the project from the Dominican village until the second day and the third day. And by that point, we pretty much had a 50-50 showing of men and women from the village.
Yeah.
Which they admitted was extraordinary for them, but we gave them permission to join in.
Yeah.
You were the sign.
We were.
No,
Doesn't
no.
happen often, but.
That's sign to me many times. God bloating all day.
Not for the right
I am the
thing.
sign.
Did we read it? No, they didn't.
Yeah.
I have another thought about food. Jesus gathered them for food for the soul. But then the physical hunger took over. That's what rings through my mind when this passage was read.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get into the I am statements, when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, because he does that, and when we get to the next psalm, which is just, or the next occurrence of Simeon, it's just a couple verses ahead. But, and that is the point that Jesus is making. You come to me, in one sense for the wrong reason, because when you ate the bread that I fed to this large crowd, it was, bread of this world in a sense, and you became hungry again. And so he's going to talk about the living bread, the bread, if you eat, I'm the bread of life. He's going to say that in 6 verse 35, I'm the bread of life. And if you eat of this, then you'll no longer hunger, but it's a different kind of hunger.
Right.
You're going to be, you're going to be with me, you're going to be with God, you're not going to have spiritual hunger. And that's kind of where this whole thing is going. And John, he keeps pointing, and again, this is all about Jesus and where he's from, and we're going to get to that hopefully today, because they're going to get in that discussion. Jesus is going to say, where's he from? the earthly answer is he's from Galilee. The divine answer is no, I'm from God. We're headed there. I think that's it. Let's go to the 10th occurrence.
Well, it feels like we leave that hanging. Verse 27 really nails down the point he's making. He says, do not work for food that
That's right.
spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. On him, the Father has placed his seal of approval.
Well, we kind of just covered that. I just didn't go over that verse. Yes. Yeah, that just sums up what we just said. Do not work for the food that perishes. You know, bread, yeah, you leave it out too long, it's going to get moldy, and it's only going to satisfy your hunger for a certain amount of time, a couple hours maybe a day, and, you know, but for the food that endures for eternal life. So, and Jesus, if we keep going, John, he expounds upon that, you know, especially when he says, I am the bread of life. And remember, when he says that in 6:35, he's taken all that back to the feeding of the 5,000. So John does that. He'll have a sign. He doesn't do it with every sign. He doesn't do it with the Jesus walking on the water, but he'll have a sign, and then that sets the stage for Jesus to talk more about these things in a divine, spiritual way. So we come to 30.
Where are we? What chapter?
Chapter 6.
30.
Yeah, so they said to him, what sign are you going to give us then, so that we may see it and believe you? What work are you performing? So we talked a couple weeks ago about the synoptics, when people ask Jesus for a sign, mainly the Jewish leaders, he gets a little perturbed, he gets somewhat annoyed, he doesn't like it. Here in John, when the leaders, or when the people in this case ask him for a sign, he sees this as an opportunity to talk more about who he is, where he's from, and what he's about. And because they ask him this, then this is really what has him launch into the statement, I am the bread of life, because they say, what sign are you going to give us? And they don't wait for an answer. They keep talking. Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And so they're hinting that that was their sign. And then Jesus said, very truly, I tell you, it was not Moses that gave you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, give us this bread always. And then what does Jesus say?
I am the bread of
I
life.
am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me, never thirsty. Yeah, never thirsty. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. And he keeps going on there. But this gives him an opportunity to engage in conversation with them. Some people are calling these discourses, and that's what John is using the sign, and then the sign gets a conversation going, it gets a discourse between Jesus and the crowd. Sometimes it's between Jesus and the disciples, sometimes it's between Jesus and the religious leaders who are challenging him, and their challenge gets stronger as we get to chapter 12.
The reaction of the crowd, though, is kind of bizarre. Because, they say, Cause then he says, you know, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my, blood, you'll have eternal life. And then they're like, we're not gonna eat him and we're not gonna drink his blood. You know, they take it literally. And it gets a little bizarre. And I believe that it says here, well, maybe you're gonna get into that, but the disciples said, this is very hard to understand. How can we accept this? And then towards the end of that chapter, I believe it says that there were many that left that way.
Yeah, so we're at 52, and 53, where Jesus says, unless you eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink
Yeah.
his blood. And then,
But the reaction was hard. People didn't like it and didn't understand it.
And it was divisive.
It was divisive.
yes, and we have talked about that, we'll continue to talk about that, especially when they say, well, this guy's a prophet, or is this guy the Messiah? They're really, I mean, it's one thing to experience or see these signs and to believe immediately, or it does take some time to process it, and they're still trying to figure out who this guy is.
This is the one I was looking for. At this point, many of the disciples turned away and deserted.
And where-
66.
Oh, yeah.
I only know that because I preached a sermon on it one time. But I thought that was interesting that these I am statements, actually, it was like a line drawn in the sand.
Well, and that's what we're gonna do. As soon as we finish the signs, and I'm gonna give you a handout of, there's 5 I am statements in John 2-12. And sometimes they do connect to the signs, not all of them. And then there's 2 other I am statements, one in 14 and one in chapter 15. But I think that's a good point. Yeah. I am statements, Jesus takes it a bit further. They always have to do, you know, I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. So, the way, I am the way. These statements take it a little bit further. And I think Pat has a good point here. Jesus is maybe drawing a line, but he's taking it a bit further. And it's harder for them to digest when he starts getting into this. I mean, because these are all divine statements, and then this all takes us back to chapter 1, right? With when John begins by saying that Jesus and God are one. Now, Jesus isn't only divine, because that's why, see, if it weren't for verse 14 in chapter 1, and then Jesus being on the earth, John might not be a gospel in the canon, because there were gospels that denied the humanity of Jesus. John stresses the divinity of Jesus, and we're seeing this in chapters 2-12, more so than any of the other 3 gospels, the synoptics. But he still lifts up the humanity of Jesus. And that's why we have John here. But what I'm trying to do, and this has been my whole purpose in working with John, is that we say John is different. Well, this is how John is different. One thing, and I said it at the beginning of this session, is that 2-12 is very tightly woven. And you get to see this progression, and it's not a bunch of stories, parables, or teachings of Jesus strung together. There's a purpose that John is hitting here as he moves from 2-12. Any comments about that? I think you're beginning to see what, I don't know, the more I work with this, I think this is a masterpiece. 2 to 12. This is really good stuff. So the crowd asks Jesus for a sign in 6:30, and then they start talking about manna. Back in when the people left Egypt and were wandering in the wilderness, and they ran out of food and they were complaining, so they get this manna from heaven, and then that sets the stage for Jesus to talk about the living bread and the bread of life and all of that. And that's the 10th occurrence of sign, the word sign in these 11 chapters. Now, if we get into chapter 7, because we're not yet to the 6th sign, which isn't until chapter 9. 7, let's start with chapter 7, verses 25 to 27. And this is going to pick up on some of the things you mentioned, so hopefully it'll tie it together. 7, 25 to 27. Now, some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, is this not the man whom they are trying to kill? And here he is, speaking openly. They say nothing. So, people know that the leaders aren't happy with Jesus. Maybe they got word that they're even trying to kill him, but he's out here speaking at the temple. They're not doing anything. Can it be that the authorities really know that this is the Messiah? Yet we know, and here we go, yet we know where this man is from. But when the Messiah comes, no one will know where he is from. And then in 28, and I'd be interested in what your translations say. Then Jesus cried out. He just didn't speak. He cried out. So what does your translation, different translations say? Right at 28.
Provoked.
Provoked.
Is that the message?
Yes.
Okay, Jerusalem Bible?
Cried out.
Cried out. Okay.
Called
Then-
out.
Called out, okay. Then Jesus cried out as he was teaching in the temple, "You know me, you know where I am from. I have not come on my own, but the one who sent me is true, and you do not know him. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me." Then they tried to arrest him, but no one laid hands on him because his hour had not yet come. Yet many in the crowd believed in him and were saying, when the Messiah comes, will he do more?
Miraculous signs.
Miraculous signs
Miraculous signs.
or signs. This is the word semeion here, or semeion, which is the plural. Will he do more signs or miraculous signs? I just lost it here. There it is. Than this man has done. So again, the people are struggling with who Jesus is. Is he the Messiah? Earlier it was he a prophet? And so this is your 11th occurrence of the word semeion. But if we just skip ahead to 41. Well, let's start with 40, same chapter 7. When they heard these words, some in the crowd said, "This is really the prophet," meaning Jesus. Others said, "This is the Messiah." But some asked, "Surely the Messiah does not come from Galilee, does he? Has not the scripture said that the Messiah is descended from David, comes from Bethlehem, the village where David lived, so he can't come from Galilee." So that's again, they're still trying to figure out who Jesus is, and you know, and Jesus kind of starts it, where is it, in 27 or 28? You know me, you know where I'm from, and they kind of started too. We know where this man is from. Well, Jesus is saying, I'm from God, and they're saying he's from Galilee. So you get that on back up. Again, John is taking this on a divine level. He's going back to chapter 1. That's the point that John continues to make again and again throughout these signs and these conversations, discourses that Jesus is having with people. Any thoughts? Now we're going to go to chapter 9. Paul and Sandy, are you there? Can you hear us? You'll have to unmute if you're going to respond. Well,
They're home.
well, not necessarily.
I think they're in work.
I thought they were coming back today.
Ask Trina.
Hopefully last
night.
Trina, where are they?
Should be at home.
Oh, they are?
They should be at home.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe they're,
Turned it on and then they went back to.
yeah,
They look like they're here, but they're not.
They're eating
I thought that might bring them,
Yeah.
bringing that mute there. All right, Paul and Sandy, welcome home. We're going back. Number 9, chapter 9. Now, we have a long story, 41 verses. This is the man who was blind, and he was born blind. Now, I want to spend a whole lot of time on the statement I'm going to make because we haven't talked about this in detail, but we'll pick it up again if you need to. But remember, the disciples begin this story with talking to Jesus. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And then, of course, Jesus has an answer. He said, well, neither. He said, this man was born blind, so the works or the glory of God could be revealed. But let me see what he actually says. Pretty close, that God's works might be revealed in you. And then I can raise a whole different discussion on human suffering, but we've talked about that. So the first 16 verses have to do really with and Jesus heals the man pretty quickly and in this story, but then it goes on. It's really the leaders, they don't want to accept that. I mean, Jesus has been performing signs, so now they're challenging this sign. They're questioning whether this man, number one, was he blind at all? Number two, was he born blind? And how do they go about that? They interrogate the man and they want him to almost prove that he was blind. And then after that, they bring his parents in. And then after that, they bring him back in. But before we get into that, well, we might not necessarily. So they interrogate the man first, and then if we jump down to 13, they brought to the Pharisees a man who had formerly been blind, and it was a Sabbath. And the Pharisees began to ask him how he received his sight, and he said, he put mud on my eyes, and then I washed, now I see. And some of the Pharisees said, now this is important, this man is not from God because he doesn't observe the Sabbath, because they don't think he's observing the Sabbath if he's healing on the Sabbath. And then others said, how can a man who is a sinner, because if you don't observe the Sabbath, you're considered a sinner. How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And then what do your translations say in the next sentence? Mine says, and they were divided.
So we're divided.
They were divided.
Deep division.
Split.
Split, yeah. Deep division. That's the NLT, deep division. Probably right. And this is the 11th occurrence. Not right there, yeah. No, this is the 12th occurrence of Simeon. And verse 16. And John is using that word again to help us understand, as Jesus performed these signs, how division is now being created. You're having different responses. Some people are believing, some say no. We're not even sure if this man was healed from being blind. We're not even sure he was blind. But because this guy, Jesus, the other guy, he's healing on the Sabbath. And then others are saying, well, this has to be from God or something, because a sinner wouldn't be able to do something like this.
Wait a
And
minute,
then-
wait a minute.
What'd you say last?
The sinner wouldn't,
Yeah, if Jesus was a sinner, because
Oh, okay.
some are saying he's a sinner because he doesn't observe the Sabbath. So they're negating the healing altogether, because he doesn't observe the Sabbath. Maybe he healed him, maybe he doesn't, but it doesn't count because
it's on the Sabbath.
he's a sinner. He does. And then others are saying, well, if he was a sinner, if he's a sinner, he wouldn't be able to do this. So that's your division. That's what's creating it, right here.
We've kind of gotten away from that symbolism there today. Was working, the stores are open on the Sabbath, on Sundays. Physical act, or sports and so forth. Maybe it's a far stretch to see that that's a sign that these people are sinners. I don't want to judge, but in the context of what I'm reading here or what I'm hearing, would that be in the context? I guess I'm throwing it out, question in my mind too. Are these people sinners because they do not see the sign that the Sabbath is the rest day? It's holy. I
Well,
mean, I count sports activities on a Sunday. That's working for coaches. And these kids are ignoring what Sunday is about, a day of rest. Thank goodness my kids were grown and I don't have to worry about that.
well, yeah, I mean, we talked about that in ministeriums. But I remember a priest in the ministerium, he was saying, look, we allow this to happen. In churches, he said, when sporting events started to occur, we really didn't say anything. He said, it's our fault. We let it happen. If we would have had nice civil discussions, it's too late now because once it started, you can't.
But is it too late?
Well, now,
Is it too
I want to
late?
raise another question. A couple of years ago, huh? Yeah, we're gonna be in the weeds a little bit, but this is important, for me anyway. A couple of years ago, I mowed the yard on Sunday and my dad, he would never do it. And I know we probably have people in this room who, no, you don't mow the yard on Sunday. So my neighbor came over and he's a jokester, but he would never mow the yard on Sundays because he lived across the street from a retired pastor. Now, the retired pastor is mowing the yard on Sunday. And so my answer is kind of joking, but I said, well, you know, I don't think much of it. For the last 30 years, I've worked every Sunday.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got paid for it.
We done from the pulpit.
Dave, I was gonna have
I
one
got paid for
comment with Anna, and then I was gonna go, what Donna said, Wayne Judd, you're good company. With Anna, I don't disagree. But maybe we're guilty of it too, because if we go out to eat for Sunday dinner, we're causing someone to work, so we're party to that. Wayne Judd is a sermon illustration. I'll test your memory. What was the
Okay.
illustration about? But he mentioned, oh, sometimes, I go home from worship and he said, yeah, I mow the yard on Sunday. But I figure I'm the pastor, I'm already working on Sunday.
And he said,
You're a good company, Dave.
which my dad happened to be in church that Sunday, he never forgot this. Wayne also said, God has the grass grow on Sundays.
That I forgot, that I forgot.
That's
Now let's go back to Jesus. Jesus healed on the Sabbath. So, Jesus' point, and we see this in the synoptics, he was saying, look, don't get too legalistic about it. So we can sit here and say these things, or we can argue about whether or not to mow the yard. Ralph isn't here, or Joe, but, before I went to seminary, I lived in North Manchester. I was already a college graduate, so I was doing some work in North Manchester. I wasn't a student at the college. But I went to a Bible study at, I think it was 5:30 in the morning. I've never done that since. But it was a good Bible study.
Is that what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Threw you off.
It's a good Bible study, and Joe and Ralph's father, Ernie, he was a pastor, and he told a story. We had a similar discussion about this, about the Sabbath and what it means, and so Ernie Dietrich, he said, my wife and I, we visited this farmer, and it was in the middle of harvest. And the guy, he couldn't sit still. It was Sunday, and he kept getting up and going to the window and looking out and thinking about the harvest and boy, what he could be doing now if it wasn't Sunday. And Ernie's point was, he should have just gone out there because he wasn't observing the Sabbath in the way that it was supposed to be observed, by being all anxious and nervous and whatever. And so the Sabbath is really, in my mind, it's not so much about what we do, it's about our mindset, and it's about our heart. And so as pastors, we try to have another day that might be a Sabbath.
Well,
So
you know,
we try to have some time when we're.
Those who live on dairy farms, they milk. The milk is for health, I mean, for physical sustenance,
Well, and
Same
we have
as-
hospitals and we
Right.
have nurses, I mean, we have jobs that require. I mean, if we're gonna live in this world we live in, and, 911 dispatchers, there are certain things that just can't take a break. So really, what it means, and this is what happens with the Talmud, and it's happening at the time of Jesus in an oral tradition, and that is, it's one thing for the Ten Commandments to say, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Then we get into the discussion, what does that mean? And the Talmud says, well, you can give someone medical attention, but only if it's life threatening. There are certain knots that you can tie on the Sabbath, which probably had to do with fishermen and that kind of thing, and so forth. So they started to really break it down as to what you can do on the Sabbath and what you can't do on the Sabbath, and that's what we get into. So, but again, I think I'm gonna end this discussion or move it to an ending by saying that it really is about a frame of mind, as opposed to, don't do this or don't do that, because we have plenty of examples here that we all either work on the Sabbath or we have do something that requires someone else to work. I remember Kenny Crider a couple of years ago, it was in the discovery class. He still feels guilty. He does it, but he still feels guilty getting gas on Sunday. So, and you know, that comes back from, you know, we're a little bit more relaxed on it now. But it's a good discussion to have, and it's a good discussion for us to ask, what does the Sabbath mean for each and one of us? And it's gonna mean, I'm gonna tell you this right now, it's gonna mean something different to different people. Just like, you know, it did to my neighbor across the street.
Yeah,
Guess what? He will mow his yard on Sunday now. And so do the other people.
yeah, when I was a kid, I mean, I liked to sew. And so on Sundays, sometimes I would just get out a pattern and start sewing, because for me, it was fun, relaxing, I loved it. I didn't have much time to do it during the week. My father would always say, you shouldn't be sewing on Sunday, that's work, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah. It's like, no, this is different, this is not work, you know, but yes, it's different for everyone,
Yeah.
absolutely.
My grandmother would say, would you sew on Sunday, you rip on Monday.
Many
times.
Oh, no.
Galen won't pick corn on Sunday.
Well, Joe and Rob should know, they grew up in dairy farms, we grew up in dairy farms, so we had to milk cows 3 times a day, well, then 2 times a day.
Well, sure.
What I found interesting when I hauled milk was the Amish, we did not pick up Amish milk on Sundays.
Is that right?
They put it in the tank, but we weren't allowed to pick it up on Sunday, so always Saturday, you had to run around and pick up all the Amish extra, then
Yeah.
Monday you had to run around and pick up all the Amish extra. So it didn't, but you know, to me, it was like, look, if you don't want us to pick it up on Sunday, then you shouldn't put it in the tank on Sunday. You're still getting paid for Sunday's milk, you're just making it inconvenience for someone else
That's right.
to work around
Yeah. That's
that,
right.
you know, and it's like,
They
you
will milk the
didn't,
cows.
you didn't do anything that you wouldn't have done on Sunday anyway, you just made it inconvenience for the rest of us.
Because the cow couldn't wait, yeah.
Yeah, the cows have to
Right,
be.
they have
Right, no, we all-
I just thought, they're still getting paid for the milk on Sunday, whether we picked it up Sunday or didn't, they
But that
didn't
was,
lose it.
that was a way for them to be at peace with that, and you're right, it
Right.
created more work for
everyone
people,
else, but yeah.
other people, but it was their way
Right.
of being able to sleep at night or to be at peace with this conundrum, this, you know, what do we do on this Sabbath?
Last comment, I hope.
Okay,
Somewhere in the Bible, it says, I know, I can't remember where things are. Was Sabbath made for man, or was man made for the Sabbath?
and that was Jesus' point, because that was in Mark, when he healed a man with a withered hand on Sunday, and they plucked grain on the Sabbath, and Jesus was criticized, and that's when he said that.
Well, another
Right.
question comes up for me is, Sunday, we have the beginning of the work week, but there are those who celebrate their day of rest on Saturday.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Doesn't matter which day, as long as you
It's up
take
to-
one day.
Yeah.
as long as, okay,
Yeah.
as long as you.
Well,
take one
remember,
day.
we're Christianity, we're derived from Judaism. And Judaism has their Sabbath on Saturday, and Christianity has their Sabbath on Sunday. And I want to think that Muslims have some form of the Sabbath on Friday, but I don't know much about that.
I think it's. Jewish, it's usually sundown on Friday to sundown on Sunday.
Exactly, it's just not Saturday, it's
Because a friend
sundown
of
to
ours, they had to
sundown.
wait to the sunset on Saturday to have their marriage,
Yeah,
which means you really don't wanna have a summer wedding.
Yeah, right.
Okay, since we've kind of killed the end of
That's
this
fine.
of this, can we go back to verse 3?
yes, we can.
There's a point there, and I have the message up this morning, so maybe this point is just made in the message, but I really like this when he's asked about the sins of whose sin was it? And according to the message, Jesus says, you're looking for someone to blame. I'm looking instead for what God can do. I don't know how close that translation is to anything else, but I really like that idea. Stop looking at what has already happened and start looking at what can happen.
Yeah,
What verse is that?
So when
verse
is it?
3. It's at the beginning of this story of the blind man. And,
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9.
yeah, chapter 9, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But it's
mine
verse
doesn't have-
3, it's verse 3, and so the question is, the disciples say to Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And a more cultural translation to the Greek would be, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Now, Donna, read again yours.
Says, you're asking the wrong question.
I love that.
You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause and effect here.
Right.
Look instead for what God can do.
That is fabulous.
Now, that's a paraphrase, and this is an example where a paraphrase is getting close to a commentary. And in this case, I think it's a good one. Sometimes I don't, so I go back and forth with paraphrases, they're helpful. And I think we need to start with a translation like this and more of a word for word translation, and then paraphrase can be helpful. There's a place for them, and in this
But
case.
that's the first time that idea actually came
Yeah.
from,
That is.
that I saw Jesus saying, you're nitpicking about the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Now what
And
happens?
it's not about blame.
Yeah.
And it's not about cause and effect. It's not about, there's this saying about, the sins of what the parents and the father visited on the children. It's not about that. It's now here Jesus says it's so God's glory can be revealed, but what does Peterson say?
He says, we need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me here, working while the sun shines.
Yeah.
My dad would have liked that too.
Now, Peterson, he went a little different direction here than I think John did, because for John, it's so that God's works might be revealed in him. So this again kind of goes back to that Jesus is the one who's going to do the work. He's going to do the healing.
And this actually puts the onus on us.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
to
yes, so-
energetically work for the one.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure that paraphrase is being true to the text here, and that's fine, because anybody's gonna do a paraphrase or a translation, you're gonna have to decide where you're gonna go with this. And that's why I say it tends more toward a commentary when we get here. How you're going to interpret that last part of verse 3. It's fine, it's a fine interpretation, it might not be to the degree, but hey, we do the best we can.
Mine had my notes or whatever have a little thing that kind of goes back to the food thing.
All
It
right,
says, therefore innocent people sometimes suffer, but if God took suffering away whenever we asked, we would follow him for comfort and convenience, not out of love and devotion. So regardless of the reasons for our suffering, Jesus has the power to help us deal with it. So when you suffer from a disease, don't ask, why did this happen to me, or what did I do wrong? Instead, ask God to give you strength for the trial and a clearer perspective on what is happening. I like that about not following him for convenience and comfort. It's kind of like, you don't follow him to eat food. Yeah.
okay.
So that's a commentary.
Yeah, yeah.
It
this
is,
what notes,
that's
yeah.
an annotated note,
Yes,
as
yeah.
opposed, see, a footnote is a note from the translation itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And then,
This is them interpreting.
yeah, most of us have study Bibles.
Yeah.
And they're all different, they're by different
Right.
publishers, they're by different scholars.
Yeah,
And so as I hear you read your annotated notes, you're commentary notes from your study Bibles, they're all different.
Right,
If you
right.
remember, because they're different
Yeah.
interpretations. And we have talked about this in innocent suffering. And I kind of like that. If God took away our suffering,
Right.
every time it happened, then, you know, because sometimes we learn from our suffering, and that's a tough pill to swallow when, you know,
Yeah,
you lose a loved one or whatever, or someone dies tragically, you know, what the hell am I gonna learn from, you know, losing a child or something? Excuse the language, but I said that to make a point. I mean, because that's how we feel. So in seminary, they told us when we were having trouble, that's okay, you'll learn from it. And that was true to a point, but I didn't want to hear it at the time.
Right.
Don't tell me when I'm suffering, I'm
Yeah.
gonna learn from it.
Right.
I will.
Or that good will come out of it.
Yeah, the good will come out of it. No, that's not what I want to hear. So,
When my
yeah,
first
we are
husband
out
left,
there.
people said, this will make you better. And I said, I thought I was good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they just knew you had a lot of.
Okay, this has been a good discussion and we will pick it up next time. And that's the 22nd, right? And then we'll meet on the 29th. Okay.
Crowder, you saying something good that you come out of it?
He's setting you up.
Hard to answer that, Mark.